At 3 minutes past 6 in the morning, my son texted me exactly 7 words that ended whatever was left of our family. "You're not joining the cruise. Monica wants just family." I sat at my kitchen table, the pale gray light of a rainy Seattle morning filtering through the window, and stared at the glowing screen of my phone. The house was entirely silent. It had been silent for 3 years, ever since my wife, Diane, passed away. The 7 words on the screen were a masterpiece of quiet, devastating cruelty. The problem was not just that I had been uninvited from a family vacation. The problem was that I had paid exactly $45,000 for that cruise. And more importantly, it was supposed to be a memorial trip to honor his dead mother. My name is Harrison Caldwell. I am 70 years old. For 4 decades, I owned and operated one of the largest commercial construction firms in the Pacific Northwest. I am a man who spent his life pouring concrete, reading architectural blueprints, and dealing with hard, uncompromising realities. I do not wear expensive suits. I prefer heavy wool sweaters, and my hands carry the thick, permanent calluses of a man who built his wealth from the ground up. I have a very simple philosophy when it comes to problems. If a building's foundation is rotten, you don't waste time repainting the walls. You tear the entire house down to the studs and start over. Diane was the foundation of our family. She was a woman of infinite warmth and patience. For years, she had talked about wanting to see Alaska. She wanted to sit on the balcony of a ship, bundled up in a heavy blanket, and watch the glaciers calve into the freezing ocean. She wanted to see the whales. We had always promised each other we would go when I finally retired. But cancer does not respect retirement plans. She died before we ever bought the tickets. 6 months ago, I decided to finally fulfill that promise. I booked a 10-day, ultra-luxury Alaskan cruise. I didn't hold back. I booked the owner's suite, a massive room with a private wraparound balcony and dedicated butler service. I booked the private helicopter glacier tours. I added the premium dining and top-tier drink packages. I invited my son, Derek, and his wife, Monica, to join me. I wanted us to stand on that balcony together, raise a glass, and finally say a proper goodbye to Diane. And now, 4 days before the ship was scheduled to leave port, my son had sent a text message telling me that his wife wanted just family. I did not throw my phone. I did not yell. I picked up my coffee mug, took a slow sip of black coffee, and hit the dial button on Derek's contact. It rang 4 times and went straight to voicemail. I hung up and dialed again. I knew my son. Derek was 34 years old, but he possessed the emotional spine of a frightened child. He had always taken the path of least resistance. He loved the comfortable, wealthy lifestyle my money provided, but he was entirely incapable of handling confrontation. On the 4th ring of the second call, the line finally clicked open. "Derek can't come to the phone right now, Harrison," a woman's voice said. "He is still asleep." It was Monica. Monica was 31 years old, stunningly beautiful, and possessed a voice that sounded like honey poured over shattered glass. She was a woman who lived her entire life for the aesthetic approval of strangers on the internet. She wore designer clothes she couldn't afford, carried herself with an unearned, aristocratic superiority, and had always viewed me with a thinly veiled, polite disdain. To Monica, I wasn't a successful businessman. I was just an uncultured, blue-collar relic with a heavy bank account. "Wake him up," I said quietly. "Harrison, please, don't be dramatic," Monica sighed, her tone dripping with condescending patience. "We had a very long night packing. I saw the text message he sent you. I told him he should have waited until a reasonable hour to tell you." She wasn't apologizing for the message. She was only apologizing for the timing. "You uninvited me from a memorial cruise for my wife," I stated, keeping my voice perfectly level. "Oh, Harrison, you are looking at this all wrong," Monica cooed, employing the sweet maternal tone she used whenever she was trying to manipulate a situation. "We are actually doing this for you. We were talking about it last night. You are 70 years old. A 10-day trip on the open ocean? The cold weather, the walking, it would be exhausting for you. It might even be dangerous for your health. My health's perfectly fine, I replied. Well, mental health is just as important, Monica countered smoothly. You have been so isolated lately. The grief is still so fresh. We didn't want you to be trapped on a ship, feeling miserable. You should stay home. Rest, find a hobby. She paused, taking a breath before delivering the final, unapologetic strike. Besides, Monica continued, my parents have never been on a luxury cruise before. My brother Bradley just lost his job and really needs a break. They are so excited. It is going to be such a wonderful bonding experience for us. We just really need some time with immediate family right now. You understand, don't you? The sheer, breathtaking audacity of the statement hung in the air. She was using the word family as a weapon to surgically excise me from my own life. She had decided that her financially ruined, pretentious parents and her lazy, unemployed brother were more entitled to Diane's memorial trip than Diane's own husband. What did Derek say about this? I asked. Derek completely agrees with me, Monica said quickly, a little too defensively. He wants what is best for my mental health. And having my family there will be so healing for both of us. I see, I said. I knew you would understand, Harrison, Monica said, her voice brightening with false relief. We will bring you back a souvenir, I promise. I have to go now. The caterers are dropping off breakfast. Try to get some rest. The line clicked dead. I set the phone down on the table. The rain continued to beat against the kitchen window. I stood up, walked into my home office, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the website for the luxury cruise line and entered the booking confirmation number I had saved in my email. The reservation loaded on the screen. I clicked on the Passenger Manifest tab. My name, Harrison Caldwell, had been completely erased from the primary passenger slot. In its place was Richard Sterling, Monica's father. Margaret Sterling, her mother, was listed in the second slot. And occupying the attached luxury suite I had booked for Derek and Monica was a third name, Bradley Sterling. Monica hadn't just uninvited me. She had systematically transferred the $45,000 reservation to her own family. But that wasn't the detail that caused the cold, hard knot of absolute clarity to form in my chest. I clicked on the Billing and Onboard Expenses tab. To transfer the names on the tickets, Monica had used Derek's authorization, but she hadn't touched the billing profile. My Platinum corporate credit card was still designated as the primary payment method for the entire reservation. Furthermore, I could see the digital receipt for changes made less than 12 hours ago. Monica had upgraded her parents to the ultra-premium unlimited alcohol package. She had booked Bradley a private massage at the ship's spa. She had reserved a private dining table at the onboard steakhouse for all 5 of them. She had used my credit card to pay an additional $4,000 in luxury upgrades for the people she had replaced me with. I stared at the screen. If I had been a different man, I would have clicked the cancel reservation button right then and there. I would have demanded a refund, locked my credit card, and called my son to scream at him. It would have been the normal, expected reaction of an angry father. But I didn't click cancel. I thought about Diane. I thought about the 34 years I had spent raising a son, trying to give him everything I never had. I thought about the mansion I had bought for him in Bellevue, the cars I had co-signed, the massive safety net I had built so he would never have to struggle. Don't buy our son comfort if it costs him character. Diane had warned me years ago. She had been right. I had bought Derek so much comfort that he had completely lost his spine. He had allowed a greedy, manipulative woman to hijack his mother's memorial and erase his father's name from the ticket, simply because he was too cowardly to tell her no. I closed the laptop. I did not lock the credit card. I did not cancel the tickets. If they wanted to go on a cruise using my money, I was going to let them. I was going to let them pack their expensive bags, board that massive ship, and sail out into the middle of the freezing ocean, where they had absolutely no control over their surroundings. They didn't just uninvite me from a cruise. They showed me exactly where I stood in the family I had built. And if they no longer considered me family, then they no longer possessed the right to live in the house I had built for them. It took Derek exactly 4 hours to find the courage to call me back. When my phone finally buzzed on the kitchen counter, the caller ID flashing my son's name, I didn't answer immediately. I let it ring 3 times, allowing the anxiety to build in his chest before I finally picked it up. "Dad," Derek said. His voice was tight, carrying the distinct, breathless quality of a man who had rehearsed his opening sentence multiple times in front of a mirror. "I am so sorry I didn't call you first. Monica told me you two already spoke." "We did," I said. My voice was calm, offering him absolutely no emotional traction to push against. "I know how this looks," Derek continued quickly, rushing to fill the silence. "I know this cruise was supposed to be about Mom, and I promise you, I want to go to Alaska with you. We will go, just the 2 of us, next summer. I swear. But not this summer," I stated. Derek let out a heavy, ragged sigh. "Dad, Monica is really struggling right now. She hasn't been telling anyone, but her depression has been getting severe. Her therapist told her that she needs to completely unplug and surround herself with her immediate support system to heal. She just needs her parents and her brother right now. I couldn't say no to her, Dad. She is my wife. I have to protect her mental health." It was a perfectly constructed, bulletproof excuse. You cannot argue against mental health. If I got angry, I would look like an insensitive monster attacking a fragile, depressed woman. There was only one problem. 3 days ago, I had driven past a high-end, rooftop champagne bar in downtown Seattle. I had been sitting at a red light when I looked up and saw Monica standing on the open-air patio. She wasn't weeping. She wasn't struggling to function. She was wearing a tight cocktail dress, laughing hysterically while taking selfies with 3 of her wealthy friends, holding a glass of expensive champagne in the air. Monica wasn't depressed. Monica was a predator who used therapeutic buzzwords as a shield to deflect accountability. "I understand," I said softly, injecting just enough disappointment into my voice to make the performance believable. "I knew you would," Derek said, the immense physical relief instantly bleeding into his voice. "Look, I am going to pay you back for the tickets. Every single penny. I'll get a bonus at work next quarter, and I will transfer the money to you, and we will bring you back something amazing from Juneau. Please, Dad, just don't make this harder than it has to be. Let her have this one peaceful trip with her family." He was begging me not to fight him. He was terrified that I would blow up the arrangement and force him to deal with Monica's wrath. "I won't make it hard, Derek," I assured him. "If Monica truly needs her family around her to heal, then I will not stand in the way. I want what is best for both of you. Thank you, Dad. I love you. Have a good trip, son." I ended the call. I set the phone down on the counter. My son had just sold out his mother's memory to appease his wife, and he had used a blatant lie to do it. It was a bitter, painful pill to swallow. I had spent my entire life trying to protect him from the harsh realities of the world, and, in doing so, I had completely failed to teach him how to stand up for himself. I walked over to the coffee pot to pour a second cup. Before I could reach the handle, my cell phone chimed. It wasn't a text message. It was a high-priority, automated security alert from my bank. I picked up the phone and opened the banking application. 30 years ago, when Derek was just a teenager learning how to drive, Diane had insisted we open an emergency joint savings account. She wanted Derek to have a financial safety net in case his car broke down or he had a medical emergency while he was away at college. Over the decades, I had continued to fund that account. It had grown substantially, serving as a quiet, secure vault, holding roughly $400,000 in liquid cash. Both Derek and I had equal withdrawal rights. The security alert on my screen was flashing red. Transaction alert. Withdrawal 9900 transaction alert. Withdrawal 9900 alert. Withdrawal 9900 alert. Fi stared at the three identical notifications. Within the span of 5 minutes, Derek had walked into a local branch and withdrawn exactly $29,700 in physical cash from our joint emergency account. In the financial and construction sectors, this specific pattern of withdrawal has a name. It is called structuring. By federal law, any cash transaction of $10,000 or more requires the bank to automatically generate a currency transaction report, CTR, which is sent directly to the IRS and federal financial monitoring agencies. Criminals, money launderers, and people trying to hide massive sums of cash from their spouses intentionally withdraw amounts just under the $10,000 threshold to avoid triggering the federal alarm. Derek and Monica had just executed a classic textbook structuring maneuver. The cold, hard knot of clarity in my chest expanded, turning into a freezing, razor-sharp focus. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. If Monica simply wanted a free luxury vacation for her family, she already had it. The cruise was fully paid for. The food was covered. I had even seen her upgrade the drink packages on my credit card. They had absolutely no need for nearly $30,000 in untraceable physical cash while floating on an all-inclusive cruise ship in the middle of the ocean. You don't withdraw that kind of cash for a vacation. You withdraw that kind of cash to pay someone who doesn't want a paper trail. I grabbed my keys off the counter. I didn't call Derek to ask him about the money. Liars only double down when confronted. If I wanted to know the truth, I had to look at the blueprints of the lie myself. I drove my truck across the bridge toward Bellevue, navigating the winding, tree-lined streets until I reached the massive $2.2 million modern mansion I had purchased in cash for my son on his wedding day. The house sat at the end of a private cul-de-sac. Derek's imported sports car and Monica's massive SUV were parked in the wide driveway. I did not walk up to the front door and ring the doorbell. When I bought the property, I had insisted on keeping a physical spare key to the side garage door, purely for emergency maintenance purposes. I parked my truck 2 blocks away, walking the rest of the distance under the cover of the dense, overcast Seattle afternoon. I slipped through the side gate, walked up to the heavy, windowless garage door, and slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft, barely audible click. I stepped into the dim, cavernous garage, closing the door silently behind me. I could hear the faint sound of voices coming from the main house, filtering through the interior door leading to the kitchen. I walked quietly toward the interior door. I didn't open it. I simply pressed my back against the wall, standing in the shadows, and listened. "I'm telling you, it's fine." Derek's voice drifted through the door, sounding anxious and strained. "I talked to him this morning. He bought the whole mental health excuse. He actually apologized to me. He isn't going to cancel the tickets." "Good," a second voice replied. It was deeper, thicker, and slurring slightly. It was Bradley, Monica's freeloading brother. Because I already told the guys at the gym I was going on a private helicopter tour. If your old man backed out, I was going to look like an idiot. "Hey, did you make sure the premium drink package is still active? I plan on drinking my body weight in Macallan." "Yes, Bradley, the drink package is active," Monica snapped irritably. "Just don't get blackout drunk on the first night and ruin the photos. I need the aesthetic to look perfectly peaceful for my followers." There was a brief pause, filled only by the sound of a zipper closing on a heavy suitcase. "Are you sure about the legal papers, Monica?" Derek asked. The anxiety in his voice had spiked, trembling with genuine fear. "I mean, my dad isn't stupid. If this goes wrong, he is going to destroy us." "It won't go wrong if you stop acting like a terrified child," Monica hissed, her voice dropping into a vicious, commanding tone. "The plan is perfect. Derek, my parents' doctor already signed the medical affidavit. We paid him in cash. The lawyer has his retainer in cash. There is no paper trail. I stood in the freezing garage, the blood turning to ice in my veins. The second the ship leaves port, Monica continued, her voice practically vibrating with dark, malicious excitement, the lawyer files the emergency petition. Your father is sitting alone in a massive house, grieving, isolated, and recently unstable, enough to be excluded from a family vacation. The judge will grant the emergency guardianship before we even reach Juneau. The sheer, monumental scale of the betrayal slammed into me like a wrecking ball. They hadn't just stolen a cruise. The cruise was just a distraction to get them out of the jurisdiction while the real crime took place. They were going to declare me mentally incompetent. I don't know, Derek whispered. He's not actually losing his memory, Monica. He just misses Mom. Sticking him in a memory care facility, it feels wrong. Then stop acting like a child and start acting like the heir, Monica snapped brutally. If we don't do this now, he could live for another 20 years. He could meet some younger woman and leave the entire estate to her. He could give it all to charity. We need control of the trust, Derek. We need control of the Bellevue house, and we need access to the investment accounts. The lawyer said once the guardianship is granted, we have total legal authority over his entire financial portfolio. Derek fell silent. He didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He simply accepted the reality that his wife was planning to lock his father in a nursing home to secure her luxury lifestyle. I didn't kick the door open. I didn't storm into the kitchen and scream at them. I backed away from the door, my steps completely silent on the concrete floor. I let myself out the side door, locked it behind me, and walked the 2 blocks back to my truck in the pouring rain. I sat behind the steering wheel, staring at the raindrops sliding down the windshield. They had not just stolen a vacation. They had tried to buy my burial while I was still breathing. They thought I was a fragile, grieving old man who would simply fade quietly into the background while they dismantled my life and claimed the spoils. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. Mitchell Reed, a sharp, gravelly voice answered on the first ring. Mitchell was 68 years old. He was a corporate trust and estate litigator, and he had been my closest friend and legal attack dog for 35 years. Mitchell, I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. I need you at your office in 20 minutes. Bring the Caldwell Trust files. Harrison? Mitchell asked, his tone instantly shifting from professional to highly alert. What's wrong? Who are we suing? We aren't suing anyone, I replied, starting the engine of my truck. We are going to tear a house down to the studs. Mitchell Reed's office was located on the 42nd floor of a sleek downtown Seattle high-rise, overlooking the gray expanse of Puget Sound. Mitchell and I had known each other for 35 years. We had met when I was just a mid-level contractor fighting a massive zoning dispute, and he was a young, aggressively ambitious corporate litigator. Over the decades, as my construction firm grew into an empire, Mitchell became my primary legal shield. He was 68 years old now, with sharp, predatory eyes and a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. He did not practice family law. He practiced high-stakes corporate trust litigation, a field where millions of dollars changed hands and entire companies were dismantled with a few signatures. When I walked into his office, he was already sitting behind his massive oak desk, a thick manila folder resting in front of him. I pulled the Caldwell Trust files, Mitchell said, skipping the pleasantries entirely. He leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers. Now tell me why my oldest client sounded like he was preparing for a corporate hostile takeover on a Sunday afternoon. I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. I did not raise my voice. I did not express any outrage. I simply laid out the facts methodically, piece by piece, exactly the way an architect lays out a blueprint. I told him about the early morning text message. I told him about the erased passenger manifest. I told him about the $29,000 $700 in structured cash withdrawals from the emergency joint account. And finally, I told him what I had heard standing in the freezing darkness of my son's garage. Mitchell did not interrupt me. His expression grew darker and colder with every sentence I spoke. When I finished, the silence in the massive office was absolute. "Emergency guardianship," Mitchell repeated, his voice dangerously low. He spun around in his chair, pulled a heavy laptop toward him, and began typing furiously. He had access to the state's sealed electronic court filing system. "It's a classic, brutal maneuver," Mitchell explained, his eyes scanning the screen. "It is usually reserved for elderly patients who are actively a danger to themselves. But corrupt attorneys have figured out how to weaponize it. They hire a physician who is willing to sign a fraudulent medical affidavit stating the target is suffering from rapid-onset dementia or Alzheimer's. They argue that the target is isolated, paranoid, and incapable of managing their own finances." Mitchell stopped typing. He stared at the screen for a long moment. "They already drafted it," he said quietly. "What?" I asked. "The petition," Mitchell said, turning the laptop so I could see the screen. "It hasn't been officially submitted to the clerk yet, but a draft has been logged in the preliminary filing queue by a boutique law firm known for handling aggressive elder law cases. It is scheduled to be electronically filed at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow morning," I noted. "Exactly 1 hour after the cruise ship leaves the dock in Seattle." Mitchell nodded, closing the laptop with a sharp snap. "It's brilliant in its cruelty, Harrison. While they are on that ship, taking selfies and drinking champagne, the lawyer files the petition. The judge looks at the affidavit signed by a reputable doctor. The judge sees that you were uninvited from a family vacation because of alleged mental instability, because you live alone, and because your grief is a documented fact. The judge is highly likely to grant a temporary emergency order to protect your assets from yourself." "And what happens then?" I asked. "Then the nightmare starts," Mitchell said grimly. "They are granted immediate legal control over your finances. Your bank accounts are frozen. The trust is suspended. And a state-appointed medical transport unit arrives at your front door to escort you to a locked memory care facility. By the time you can secure legal representation to fight it, they will have already looted your estate." I looked out the massive window at the dark rain clouds rolling over the city. They thought they had built the perfect trap. They had relied on my silence, my grief, and my love for my son to keep me blind until the cage door locked behind me. "Mitchell," I said, turning my attention back to the lawyer, "if a building inspector finds black mold in the foundation of a house, what is the protocol?" Mitchell smiled. It was the terrifying, bloodless smile of a shark that had just smelled a drop of blood in the water. "You condemn the property," Mitchell replied. "You strip the assets, you gut the interior, and you tear it down." "Exactly," I said. "So let's start." The leaned forward and began issuing the directives. "First," I instructed, "the emergency joint savings account. Derek withdrew $29,000. There is roughly $370,000 left in that vault. I am the primary account holder. I want you to initiate an immediate wire transfer of the entire remaining balance to a secure, sole proprietor corporate account under my name. I want that joint account zeroed out before the banks open tomorrow." Mitchell jotted a note on his legal pad. "Done. The funds will be legally secured." "What about the cruise?" "Leave the tickets exactly as they are," I said. "If we cancel the tickets, they won't get on the ship. We need them on that ship. We need them trapped in international waters, completely isolated from the mainland. But I want you to log into the cruise line portal and permanently detach my corporate platinum credit card from the onboard folio. Let Monica's father figure out how to pay for his premium alcohol package when my card declines." "Beautiful," Mitchell murmured, continuing to write. "And the house?" "The house in Bellevue," I said softly. the image of my son cowering in the garage flashing through my mind. I bought it for them in cash. The deed is held within a revocable living trust which I control as the sole trustee. Correct? Mitchell said, opening the manila folder and pulling out the heavy, notarized trust documents. Because it is a revocable trust, Derek and Monica only possess the right of occupancy. They do not possess legal ownership. You can revoke the trust at any time. Revoke it, I ordered. The second you revoke it, the property legally reverts entirely to me. And the moment it reverts to me, I want it sold. Mitchell paused, looking up from his legal pad. Harrison, it's a $2.2 million property. A standard real estate listing takes months to close. I don't want a standard listing, I replied. I want you to contact one of the commercial cash buyer firms we use for liquidating toxic corporate assets. Tell them I will sell the property for $1.5 million in pure cash under 2 conditions. First, they must close the transaction within 72 hours. Second, they must purchase it, as is, including all remaining interior furnishings. And they are authorized to send a clean-out crew to gut the house the moment the ink is dry. Mitchell's eyes widened slightly as the sheer, devastating magnitude of the counterattack finally registered. You are going to let them go on vacation, Mitchell said slowly, awe creeping into his voice. And while they are gone, you are going to sell the house they live in. They wanted to be just family, I said coldly. My money is no longer a part of their family. They can keep the designer clothes they packed in their suitcases. Everything else belongs to the new owners. Hudson, Mitchell said, leaning forward. This is going to completely destroy them. When they get back, they will have no money, no credit cards, and literally no home to return to. They didn't just try to steal a house, Mitchell, I reminded him quietly. They tried to steal my freedom. They tried to lock me in a cage so they could buy expensive champagne. I stood up and walked over to Mitchell's desk. Tomorrow morning, I continued. The second their ship leaves the dock, you will file a massive, preemptive injunction blocking the emergency guardianship petition. You will submit the evidence of the structured cash withdrawals to the federal banking authorities, and you will file a formal complaint with the state medical board against whatever doctor signed that fraudulent affidavit. I want the doctor stripped of his license, and I want the dirty lawyer who drafted the petition investigated for ethical violations. Mitchell picked up a sleek silver pen and slid the trust revocation documents across the desk toward me. Who are we legally destroying today, Harrison? Mitchell asked, his voice filled with dark anticipation. I picked up the pen. I thought about the text message I had received at 6 o'clock in the morning. I thought about the cruise I had booked to honor Diane. The people who used my grief as evidence, I replied. I signed the documents. The trap was officially armed. Tomorrow morning, my son and his wife were going to put on their expensive clothes, drive to the port, and walk up the gangway of a luxury cruise ship. They were going to smile for the cameras. They were going to toast to their brilliant, flawless victory, and they would have absolutely no idea that they were stepping off the edge of a cliff. There is a very specific, intoxicating kind of arrogance that belongs to people who believe they have gotten away with the perfect crime. On the morning of the cruise embarkation, the weather in Seattle finally cleared, leaving behind a brilliant, cloudless blue sky. I parked my truck 3 blocks away from the massive cruise terminal at Pier 91. I didn't get out. I simply sat behind the steering wheel, looking through a pair of binoculars at the designated VIP drop-off zone. At exactly 10 o'clock, a stretch black limousine pulled up to the curb. Monica stepped out first. She was wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat, massive designer sunglasses, and a flowing, expensive linen dress. She looked like a woman stepping onto the red carpet at a film festival. Derek followed her, looking slightly nervous but trying his best to project the image of a wealthy young executive. Next came the Sterling family. Richard, Monica's father, stepped out wearing a tailored blazer and a pastel polo shirt, looking every inch the wealthy patrician he was desperately pretending to be. Margaret followed, looking down her nose at the porters handling their luggage. Finally, Bradley emerged, already looking slightly hungover, wearing mirrored sunglasses and a smirk that made my blood boil. They looked incredibly happy. They looked like a family. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked down at the screen. It was an automated notification from Instagram. Monica had just posted a new story. I opened the application. It was a video of the 5 of them standing in front of the massive, gleaming hull of the cruise ship, holding flutes of complimentary boarding champagne. Monica was smiling radiantly at the camera. "Healing trip to Alaska with real family," the caption read, complete with a white heart emoji. A moment later, a text message from Derek appeared on my screen. "Thanks for understanding, Dad. We are boarding now. We'll talk when we're back. Love you." He was trying to buy his own peace of mind. He wanted to enjoy the $45,000 vacation I had paid for, without the heavy, suffocating weight of guilt. He wanted me to give him permission to betray me. I typed my response carefully. "Enjoy every minute." I hit send. It was the absolute truth. I wanted them to enjoy every single second of that boarding process, because it was the last time they would ever experience luxury for the rest of their lives. Through the binoculars, I watched them walk into the VIP priority terminal. I knew exactly what was going to happen next. They would bypass the massive lines of regular passengers and walk up to the dedicated concierge desk for the owner's suite. The concierge would greet them warmly, confirming their names on the passenger manifest. Because I had not cancelled the tickets, the boarding process itself would be completely seamless. They would feel the intoxicating rush of total victory. But a luxury cruise ship operates entirely on a cashless system. Every passenger is required to link a credit card to their onboard folio to cover gratuities, drinks, spa treatments, and shore excursions. When Monica handed the concierge her room key to establish her spending account, the system would immediately flag that the primary payment method, my corporate platinum card, had been permanently detached. I could almost perfectly visualize the scene. Monica would smile, assuming it was a simple administrative error. She would hand the concierge Derek's primary credit card. The concierge would swipe it, only to politely inform her that the card was declined because the available balance was nearly maxed out. Derek, who had always relied on my emergency account to cover his massive credit card bills, would suddenly realize the safety net was gone. Richard Sterling, desperate to maintain the illusion of wealth in front of the VIP concierge, would be forced to pull out his own credit card to secure the onboard accounts. And then the real damage would begin. Because my platinum card was gone, all the pre-booked luxury upgrades were instantly voided. Bradley would be informed that his unlimited top-tier premium alcohol package was cancelled. Monica's private spa treatments were wiped from the schedule. The private helicopter tour over the Juneau glaciers, a $5,000 excursion, was cancelled unless Richard wanted to pay for it out of his own pocket. They would try to play it cool. They would blame it on a banking glitch. They would tell themselves they would sort it out with me when they returned. They would put on brave, smiling faces for the cameras, determined to enjoy the massive owner's suite. I watched the massive cruise ship sound its heavy, reverberating horn. The gangways were pulled back. The ship slowly pushed away from the dock, maneuvering out into the deep, dark water of Puget Sound. Heading north toward Alaska, they were gone. They were trapped in a floating casino in international waters, completely isolated from the mainland, with terrible cellular reception and astronomically expensive satellite internet. My cell phone rang. It was Mitchell Reed. "The ship has officially cleared the port," Mitchell announced, his voice crackling with pure professional adrenaline. The dirty lawyer's emergency guardianship petition was automatically filed in the system 3 minutes ago. I have already submitted the counter-injunction. The judge has frozen their petition, pending a full evidentiary hearing. You are completely safe, Harrison. Good, I said, putting the truck in gear. Are the buyers ready? They are waiting for you in conference room B, Mitchell confirmed. They have the cash, and they have the clean-out crew standing by. 20 minutes later, I walked into Mitchell's downtown office. Sitting at the long mahogany table were 3 executives from a major real estate liquidator firm. They specialized in buying distressed, toxic, or foreclosed commercial properties in pure cash, sight unseen. They had reviewed the blueprints, the tax records, and the neighborhood comps for the Bellevue mansion. They knew the house was worth at least $2.2 million. I was offering it to them for $1.5 million. It was a massive, undeniable steal, and they were eager to close before I changed my mind. Mr. Caldwell, the lead executive said, standing up and shaking my hand. We have the final contracts prepared. As requested, this is an as-is purchase. We are assuming total legal liability for the property and everything currently residing inside it. Mitchell slid a thick stack of papers across the table. Let me be absolutely clear, I said, looking directly at the lead executive. When I say everything inside it, I mean everything. The furniture, the electronics, the clothes in the closets, the wine in the cellar. The moment my signature touches this paper, every single item inside that house becomes your legal property. We understand, the executive said smoothly. Our clean-out crews are highly efficient. We usually donate the clothing and auction the high-end furniture to offset the renovation costs. We plan to completely gut the interior and modernize the floor plan before flipping it. Gut it to the studs, I said. I picked up the pen and signed my name on the final deed transfer. It was done. The irrevocable transfer of ownership was complete. The money would be wired into my secure corporate account within the hour. I walked out of Mitchell's office and stood on the sidewalk, looking out over the city. Somewhere off the coast of British Columbia, Monica was probably standing on a private balcony, drinking champagne she had forced her father to pay for, congratulating herself on pulling off the perfect crime. She thought she was going to come home to a $2 million mansion and total control of my financial empire. She was wrong. While they sailed away from me, I sold the shore they expected to come home to. There is no isolation quite as absolute as being trapped on a massive ship in the middle of the North Pacific Ocean. By the 3rd day of the cruise, the brilliant facade of Monica's healing family trip had completely collapsed. The luxury vacation they had stolen was rapidly devolving into an inescapable, floating nightmare. The primary issue was money. Cruise ships are designed to continuously extract wealth from their passengers, and without my corporate platinum card acting as an invisible shield, the financial reality of the trip crashed down on them. Because Derek's credit card was maxed out, Monica's father, Richard, had been forced to link his personal card to the room folios. Richard liked to project the image of a wealthy patriarch, but in reality, he was heavily leveraged and lived entirely on credit. When the onboard system automatically placed a $3,000 hold on his card to cover the upcoming gratuities and basic expenses for 5 people, his bank panicked and flagged it for fraud. Suddenly, their room keys stopped working at the premium dining venues. They were locked out of the onboard steakhouse. They were turned away from the specialty seafood restaurant. They were forced to eat exclusively at the crowded, chaotic buffet with the thousands of regular passengers they considered beneath them. The tension in the massive owner's suite became suffocating. Bradley, who had expected to spend the entire trip drinking expensive whiskey by the pool, was furious. Without the premium drink package, a single glass of Macallan cost $25. After 2 days of paying out of pocket, Richard cut him off entirely. Bradley threw a massive tantrum in the middle of the pool deck, screaming at Monica for dragging him on a cheap vacation. Margaret and Richard were also turning on Monica. They had boarded the ship, believing I was footing the entire bill. Now, they were hemorrhaging money. Trapped in a single suite with their lazy, angry son, and the high-end Alaskan excursions they had bragged to their friends about were all cancelled. Monica tried to call her dirty lawyer in Seattle to demand an update on the guardianship petition, hoping that the legal takeover of my estate was already complete. But satellite phone rates on the ship were nearly $10 a minute, and the onboard internet package was astronomically expensive. Because their credit cards were failing, she couldn't maintain a connection long enough to get a straight answer. They were completely cut off. And while they were stranded at sea, watching their stolen luxury vanish into thin air, my demolition crew went to work. Mitchell Reed did not simply block the emergency guardianship petition. He annihilated it. On Tuesday morning, Mitchell walked into the county courthouse and filed a massive, preemptive injunction. He submitted documented proof that my son and his wife had lied about my isolation by intentionally uninviting me from a family vacation. He submitted the forensic financial report detailing the $29,000 in structured cash withdrawals, instantly triggering a federal banking investigation. The corrupt lawyer who had drafted the petition was terrified. The moment he saw Mitchell's name on the countersuit, he realized he had been lured into a trap. To save his own license, he instantly withdrew his representation of Derek and Monica, abandoning them completely. Simultaneously, Mitchell filed a formal complaint with the state medical board against the doctor who had signed the fake affidavit regarding my mental health. By Wednesday afternoon, the doctor's clinic was being actively investigated for medical fraud. The legal infrastructure of their plot was completely dismantled. But the physical demolition was even more satisfying. The real estate liquidators I had sold the Bellevue mansion to did not waste a single second. Because they had purchased the property as is, they were eager to clear the house and begin renovations immediately. On Wednesday morning, 3 massive industrial dumpsters were rolled onto the pristine driveway of the Bellevue estate. A crew of 15 men, wearing heavy work boots and carrying sledgehammers, walked through the front door. I didn't have to be there to know exactly what happened. The liquidator's project manager sent me progress photos every hour. They started with the personal belongings: Monica's massive collection of designer clothes, the expensive shoes she photographed for Instagram, and the high-end handbags she bought using my money were all shoved into heavy black trash bags and tossed directly into the dumpsters. The custom-built, imported Italian leather sofa in the living room was carried out and hauled away. Derek's massive 85-inch television was unbolted from the wall. They didn't just pack the house up, they gutted it. The liquidators had decided that the modern aesthetic Monica had so carefully curated was outdated and needed a complete overhaul for a quick flip. The crew took crowbars to the custom kitchen cabinetry. They ripped the expensive hardwood floors down to the subfloor. They smashed the imported bathroom tiles and tore out the drywall in the living room to run new electrical wiring. By Friday afternoon, the beautiful $2.2 million mansion was reduced to bare wooden studs, exposed pipes, and concrete. It looked like a bomb had gone off inside it. The trap finally snapped shut on Saturday morning. The cruise ship was navigating the freezing waters near Glacier Bay when Monica's phone briefly caught a signal from a coastal cell tower. A notification chimed. It was an automated email from the Bellevue Homeowners Association, citing a noise complaint and an unauthorized commercial dumpster parked in the driveway of her residence. Confused and annoyed, Monica immediately texted her next-door neighbor, a woman she frequently gossiped with, asking her to check on the house. 10 minutes later, the neighbor replied, "Monica, I am so sorry. What happened? Did you get foreclosed on?" Attached to the text message were 4 high-resolution photos. Monica opened the first photo. It showed 3 massive industrial dumpsters sitting in her driveway. filled to the brim with her clothes, her furniture, and her expensive home decor. She opened the second photo. It was a shot taken through the front window. The interior of the house was completely unrecognizable. The walls were gone. The kitchen was a pile of debris. The house she had used to project her wealthy lifestyle to the world had been violently erased. And in the final photo, staked firmly into the perfectly manicured front lawn, was a large, brightly colored sign that read, Astris Premiumi Secured, under new commercial ownership. A scream echoed down the luxury hallway of the owner's suite deck. It was not a scream of fear. It was the raw, hysterical, agonizing shriek of a woman who had just watched her entire kingdom burn to ash. Derek, hearing the scream, rushed out of the bathroom. Monica shoved the phone into his hands, her face pale, her breathing shallow and panicked. Derek looked at the photos of his gutted house. He looked at his ruined furniture sitting in a trash pile. He looked at the commercial ownership sign on his lawn. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. The blood simply drained from his face until he looked like a ghost. In that exact moment, the weak, cowardly son, who had allowed his wife to uninvite me from his mother's memorial cruise, finally realized the terrifying magnitude of the mistake he had made. He had tried to lock his father in a cage, and his father had responded by tearing the sky down on top of him. They still had 4 days left on the cruise. 4 days trapped in a single room with angry in-laws, failing credit cards, and the absolute, undeniable knowledge that they had absolutely no home to return to. The vacation was over. The nightmare had just begun. When a cruise ship docks at the end of a 10-day voyage, the passengers usually disembark looking rested, tanned, and relaxed. When Derek, Monica, and the Sterling family walked down the gangway at the Seattle port, they looked like refugees fleeing a war zone. The last 4 days of the trip had been an absolute, unmitigated disaster. Because their credit cards were failing, and Richard was refusing to cover any more onboard expenses, they had spent the remainder of the luxury vacation confined to their room, eating cold room service and screaming at each other. Bradley had gotten into a physical altercation with a bartender over a declined drink charge, resulting in him being confined to his cabin by cruise security. But the real nightmare began when they stepped off the ship and tried to re-enter the real world. Standing on the sidewalk outside the cruise terminal, Derek pulled out his phone to call the private black car service he usually used for airport and port transfers. The dispatcher politely informed him that the primary card on file was declining. Derek, panicking, tried to log into his banking application to transfer funds from the joint emergency account. The account balance read $0. He couldn't afford a town car. He couldn't even afford a large luxury Uber. Humiliated and exhausted, the 5 of them were forced to drag their expensive, heavy suitcases through the rain and cram themselves into a single battered yellow taxi minivan. The taxi ride to Bellevue was completely silent. When the minivan finally pulled up to the private cul-de-sac, the driver put the car in park. Derek paid the fare using the last $200 of cash in his wallet. They dragged their luggage out of the trunk and turned to face the property. The heavy iron gates at the bottom of the driveway were pulled shut, secured by a thick, heavy-duty industrial chain and a massive padlock. Sitting just behind the gate were the 3 commercial dumpsters Monica had seen in the photos. They were overflowing with debris. Sticking out of the top of the closest dumpster, completely ruined by the Seattle rain, was the custom-made imported Italian headboard from their master bedroom, and staked firmly into the grass was the large red and white sign, *private property, no trespassing, under new commercial ownership. "Open the gate!" Monica screamed, rushing forward and rattling the heavy iron bars. Her voice was shrill, completely devoid of the cultured aristocratic tone she usually affected. "Derek, do something. Break the lock. This is my house." "Ma'am, step away from the gate." A man in a dark tactical uniform stepped out from the shadow of the garage. He was a private security contractor, hired by the real estate liquidators to guard the property during the renovation process. He walked down the driveway and stood on the other side of the iron bars, looking at them with complete indifference. "I am the owner of this house," Monica yelled, pointing a manicured finger at the guard. "I live here. You need to let me inside right now, or I am calling the police." "You aren't the owner, ma'am." The security guard replied calmly. "This property was sold to Apex Commercial Holdings 4 days ago. If you try to climb this gate, I will have you arrested for criminal trespassing." "It's a mistake," Derek said, his voice trembling as he stepped up to the gate. "My father bought this house. It's in a trust. It can't be sold." "It wasn't a mistake, Derek." Derek froze. He turned around slowly. I was standing on the sidewalk behind them. I was wearing my heavy wool sweater. Standing directly beside me was Mitchell Reed, holding a thick leather briefcase. Richard and Margaret Sterling, who had been standing near the luggage looking horrified, suddenly looked incredibly nervous. They knew exactly who I was, and they knew exactly whose money they had just spent. "Dad," Derek breathed, his eyes wide and panicked. "Dad, what did you do?" "I did exactly what Monica asked me to do," I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly over the sound of the rain. "I removed myself from people who said I wasn't family." "Harrison, this is insane," Monica shrieked, tears of pure rage streaming down her face. "You sold our house while we were on vacation. You threw my clothes in a dumpster. You are a sick, twisted old man." Mitchell Reed stepped forward. He did not yell. He simply opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of manila envelopes, handing the first one through the bars of the gate to Derek. "That is the formal, notarized revocation of the Caldwell Living Trust," Mitchell stated coldly. "Because it was a revocable trust, your father possessed the sole legal authority to dissolve it. The property legally reverted to him, and he liquidated it to a commercial cash buyer. You have absolutely no legal claim to this residence." Mitchell pulled out a second envelope and handed it to Monica. "That is a formal notification from the State Medical Board," Mitchell continued, his voice perfectly flat. "The physician who signed your fraudulent affidavit regarding Harrison's mental competence is currently under investigation for medical malpractice and ethical violations." Monica stared at the envelope, the color completely draining from her face. "And finally," Mitchell said, handing a third envelope to Richard Sterling, who looked like he was about to vomit, "that is a copy of a federal suspicious activity report. We have submitted documented evidence to the IRS and federal banking regulators detailing $29,700 in structured cash withdrawals executed by Derek and Monica Caldwell. Structuring is a federal felony. The word felony hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "You can't do this," Monica cried, her voice cracking. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "He's crazy. He's losing his mind. He's just a grieving old man who doesn't know what he's doing." Mitchell reached into his briefcase one last time. He pulled out a thick, bound medical document. "This," Mitchell said, holding it up so everyone could see the official hospital seal, "is an independent, comprehensive psychiatric and neurological evaluation conducted by the Chief of Neurology at Seattle General Hospital 3 days ago. It legally certifies that Harrison Caldwell is of perfectly sound mind, possesses full cognitive capacity, and is entirely capable of managing his own legal and financial affairs. Your emergency guardianship petition has been permanently blocked by a superior court judge. The trap had completely closed. Every single lie they had built, every single manipulation they had planned, had been systematically destroyed. They had tried to outsmart a man who had spent 40 years reading blueprints and building skyscrapers. Derek dropped the manila envelope onto the wet pavement. His knees gave out, and he collapsed onto the wet grass next to the sidewalk. He looked at the gutted ruins of the mansion I had built for him. He looked at his ruined furniture sitting in the dumpster. He looked at his wife, who was staring at the legal documents in absolute terrified silence. And finally he looked at me. "Dad," Derek whispered, tears spilling down his cheeks. He wasn't acting. It was the genuine, agonizing sorrow of a man who realized he had just destroyed his own life. "Dad, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. She told me it was the only way to protect the money. I'm your son. Please don't do this." He was still begging me to save him. Even after everything, he was still asking me to fix the foundation he had intentionally destroyed. I looked down at my son kneeling in the rain. I felt a profound, heavy sadness in my chest. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel happy. I just felt the crushing weight of a failure that had been 34 years in the making. "You texted me I wasn't family." "Derek," I said softly. "I believed you. I was wrong," Derek sobbed, reaching out toward me. "I was stupid. It's just a house, Dad. We can fix this." "You didn't lose a house, Derek," I replied, turning my back on the massive iron gates. "You lost the man who built it for you." I walked away, leaving them standing on the sidewalk in the pouring rain, staring at the ruins of their stolen kingdom. The aftermath of that afternoon was entirely predictable. When you remove the money from a toxic relationship, the relationship instantly shatters. Without my financial safety net, Derek and Monica's marriage disintegrated into a bitter, vicious war of mutual blame. Facing federal investigation for the structured cash withdrawals, Derek was forced to resign from his executive job. Because they had no money, no home, and locked credit cards, they were forced to move into a tiny, cramped apartment with Richard and Margaret, who were also drowning in debt. Bradley was permanently blacklisted by the cruise line for assaulting a crew member. The doctor who signed the fake affidavit was stripped of his medical license. The dirty lawyer who drafted the guardianship petition agreed to surrender his law license to avoid criminal prosecution for fraud. They had tried to lock me in a cage. Instead, they had built a prison entirely for themselves. The demolition was complete. The ground was finally clear. There was only one thing left to do. There is a profound, undeniable difference between being alone and being at peace. 1 year after I stood in the pouring rain and watched my son drop to his knees on the sidewalk, I finally packed my bags and flew to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. I did not book a massive luxury owner's suite. I did not arrange for a private helicopter tour or a dedicated butler service. I booked a single modest cabin on the starboard side of an Alaskan cruise ship, featuring a small private balcony that looked directly out over the water. I unpacked my suitcase quietly. I took out a small, silver-framed photograph of Diane and set it carefully on the nightstand next to the bed. I poured myself a single glass of bourbon, pulled a heavy wool blanket over my shoulders, and stepped out onto the balcony. The air in Alaska is different than anywhere else in the world. It is incredibly sharp, carrying the heavy, ancient chill of the glaciers and the deep, dark salt of the Pacific Ocean. It bites at your lungs in a way that makes you feel profoundly, undeniably alive. The ship was moving slowly through a narrow, towering fjord. On either side of the vessel, massive, jagged cliffs of blue-white ice rose hundreds of feet into the air. The silence was absolute, broken only by the low, steady thrum of the ship's engines and the occasional, thunderous crack of ice calving off the glacier and plunging into the freezing water below. I rested my forearms on the cold metal railing. I watched the ice, and for the first time in 3 years, the crushing, suffocating weight of my grief finally began to lift. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the small framed photograph of Diane, and set it gently on the small table next to me. "I finally made it, Diane," I whispered, the wind pulling the words away almost immediately. "It's as beautiful as you always said it would be. I just wish our son had been worth bringing." I thought about the last 12 months. I thought about the total catastrophic collapse of the life Derek had known. When you strip away the foundation of a poorly built house, it doesn't just lean. It collapses inward, destroying everything inside it. The federal investigation into the structured cash withdrawals had been brutal. To avoid a felony indictment, Derek had been forced to fully cooperate with the authorities, admitting that he had knowingly broken federal banking laws to hide the money. He avoided prison time, but the scandal had cost him his executive position at the tech firm. Monica, entirely unable to cope with a life devoid of luxury, had filed for divorce 6 months later. She tried to demand alimony, but because Derek was unemployed and drowning in legal debt, there was absolutely nothing left for her to take. She moved back into her parents' cramped apartment, her carefully curated social media image entirely destroyed by the very public, very humiliating legal fallout. They were gone. They were simply ghosts haunting the wreckage of a life I had foolishly tried to buy for them. Don't buy our son comfort if it costs him character. Diane's warning echoed in my mind, perfectly clear over the sound of the freezing wind. She had seen the flaw in the foundation years before I did. I had spent my entire life building a massive financial empire because I had grown up with nothing. I wanted Derek to have the perfect life. I wanted him to have the expensive education, the beautiful house, the luxury cars, and the financial safety net. I thought I was being a good father. But I hadn't been building a man. I had been building a weak, fragile dependency. I had bought him so much comfort that he never had to develop a spine. He never had to learn how to stand up for himself, how to face conflict, or how to protect the people who actually loved him. When Monica demanded that he erase his own father from his mother's memorial trip, he didn't fight her. He simply bowed his head and sent a text message, entirely confident that my money would continue to protect him from the consequences of his own cowardice. He didn't realize that my money was the only reason she married him in the first place. Down in the dark water below the balcony, the surface suddenly broke. A massive humpback whale breached, its dark, glistening back rising out of the ocean. It let out a long, echoing spout of mist before slowly slipping back beneath the freezing waves, its massive tail fin slapping the water with a sound like a gunshot. It was breathtaking. It was the exact moment Diane had always wanted to see. I smiled, a genuine, quiet smile, and raised my glass of bourbon toward the dark water. My cell phone, resting on the table next to Diane's picture, suddenly vibrated. The screen lit up in the fading northern light. I picked it up. It was a text message from Derek. Dad, I know you're in Alaska. I saw the dates on the calendar before everything happened. I'm sitting in my apartment. It's so quiet here. I'm so sorry, Dad. Can we please talk? I just want my family back. I stared at the words glowing on the screen. A year ago, those words might have broken my heart. A year ago, the instinct to fix the problem, to rebuild the house, to rescue my son from his own mistakes might have overwhelmed me. I might have called him back. I might have offered him a lifeline. But I wasn't the same man who had sat in that kitchen in Seattle and read the first text message. I looked at the photograph of my wife. I looked out at the massive, unbroken expanse of the Alaskan wilderness. I thought about the peace I finally felt standing on this balcony. If I called him back, I would be laying the first brick of a new rotten foundation. I would be teaching him, once again, that there are no permanent consequences for his actions. I did not reply. I did not block his number. I simply pressed the power button on the side of the phone, turning the screen entirely black, and slipped it back into my pocket. It wasn't an act of revenge. The revenge was already over. It was simply an act of peace. I was finally choosing my own peace over the exhausting, endless burden of funding his life. I pulled the heavy wool blanket tighter around my shoulders and leaned against the cold railing, watching the ice drift slowly past the hull of the ship. My son told me I wasn't joining the cruise because his wife wanted just family. So I let them take the trip. I let them board the ship, and I let them sail away. And by the time they came home to a gutted house and a ruined life, they finally understood something I should have taught them years ago. Family is not the people who live in the house you bought. Family is not the people who smile for the cameras while spending your money. Family is the people who would never, under any circumstances, erase your name from the ticket.